Hello and welcome back to my channel. Today I am going to do a tier ranking of all of the Stephen King books that I've read. So once again, welcome or welcome back. I am so glad you're here and decided to click on this video. I apologize for the bad lighting. I am once again on a layover in a hotel room and it is evening, so I don't have any natural light, so I'm just kind of having to work with what I've got. But I did want to get this video recorded, so I figured let's just do it. So today, like I said, I'm going to be doing a tier ranking of all the Stephen King books that I have read. Now he has like at least 75, I think closer to 80 at this point, and I have read 34. So by no means am I like an expert of all things Stephen King, but I've read a decent number and I consider myself a pretty big fan. There's some books of his that like I just haven't gotten to yet, and there's some that I know I'll never read, like the Dark Tower series. It just doesn't interest me, even though I know it's like his masterpiece. I just can't see myself ever getting into it, but that's all right. There's plenty of other stuff for me to choose from. So I have made a little tier chart, so let's go ahead and just get started with it. So I feel like this could be kind of crazy because a lot of these I have read a few years ago, and some of the ones that are less memorable I remember less about. So we are just gonna go with it. So my tiers are perfection, solid, decent, meh, and absolutely not. So you might think, being like a pretty big King fan, that all of these are like super amazing to me, but that is just not the case. So let's just go ahead and get started. So funny enough, the first one on here is 11/22/63, which is no secret that it is my favorite book in the world, not just my favorite Stephen King book. So that is gonna go up to perfection, obviously. This is absolutely the best book that I've ever read, and I'm sure you've heard me talk about it before, but it's a time travel book where this regular man is tasked by this guy who has discovered this like wormhole into the past. They call it the rabbit hole, and to stop the JFK assassination. And it's just an incredible story. It's such a journey. It's so beautiful, and it's like so intense. It's got it all. The next book is Billy Summers, which I know I really enjoyed reading at the time that I read it, but I honestly can't remember that much about it. I think I'm gonna put it under solid because I remember I enjoyed it. It's a crime novel, so it's definitely not like a horror book that King is known for, but you know, I still really enjoyed it. It's been a while, so I can't remember too much about it, but I liked it a lot. Next is Blockade Billy. So this is a short story or a novella. It's not very long, but I remember picking this up very early on in my King journey because it was about a baseball player, which is like my favorite thing. And I think I saw it like from the library, and I was just like, oh, a Stephen King book that is about baseball and something creepy, and it was great. So this is about a guy who plays on a professional baseball team, and when he's a catcher, and when he's getting guys out, he like stabs them when they're like sliding into home. So he ends up like, you know, he's like getting in trouble, but he like tapes knives to his shoes, I think. Like I said, it's been a while, but I thought it was a pretty clever story. Nothing clearly that sticks out too much to me though, so I'm gonna put this under decent. Next, I have Carrie, the very first book that Stephen King had published, which I have only read once, and it was quite a few years ago. I do think this is kind of interesting because it's definitely not written in the style of the majority of his books. It's kind of written in a epistolary style. It's like, is that the right word? Okay, I don't know if that's the right word because it's apparently mostly for letters, like as the story, but Anyways, it's like newspaper articles and like interviews and stuff. So I think that's an interesting way to write a book, and I always enjoy that kind of stuff. So I'm gonna put this in solid because I really did enjoy it, and it's a classic for a reason. Next is Christine, which I think, as a millennial and someone who was not alive when this book came out, is incredibly underrated. This is about a car that's evil and starts killing people, and it sounds super goofy and silly, but it is so good. This book was such a surprise to me when I read it. I had no idea that this was going to become one of like my top King books. I love the relationships between the characters and like how this car comes between these like lifelong friends, and like I don't know. It's a really good book, and people don't give it a chance because they think it's a weird concept, which it is, but definitely give it a chance. So that one is gonna definitely go in perfection. Obviously, 11/22/63 is like the top perfection, and nothing is better than that. So we'll just get that out of the way. That should just be in a tier by itself, but I didn't make one. Next is Cujo, which is about a Saint Bernard who gets rabies and bites people, and it is going in absolutely not. I thought this was one of the most boring books that I have ever read, ever. Nothing happens. This dog is got rabies. It's sad, and then like nothing continues to happen. Like it was just a bunch of people hanging out at a farm in like this little town. God, I think I've blocked it out because it was such a drag to get through. So, anyways, absolutely not. Next is Different Seasons. This is a short story novella collection. I'm putting this in solid. This has 4 stories, which are some of my favorite short stories by Stephen King. So it has Rita Hayworth and the Shawshank Redemption, Apt Pupil, which is like one of the creepiest stories I've ever read, The Body, and what is the other one called? The Breathing Method, which all of those were really, really good. So that is definitely the collection I would recommend to anyone that is wanting to try some of his short stories. Next, I have Dr. Sleep. Now, I am torn whether I want to put this into perfection or solid. This is an unpopular opinion, but I love, okay, I guess I should say, in case you don't know, Dr. Sleep is the sequel to The Shining, and it takes place many years later, like 30 years after the events of The Shining, and it follows Danny Torrance, who now goes by Dan. He is an alcoholic trying to be a recovering alcoholic, and he still has the shine, and some other stuff happens. He meets a girl that also has a shine, and yeah. So it was so good, and the unpopular opinion that I didn't actually finish saying is that I like Dr. Sleep more than The Shining, and I love The Shining. So I guess that means there's my answer. It's going under perfection. I know it's weird. Like, I think that The Shining is a great story, but I think the reason that, I don't know, I think there's a lot of nostalgia for people that like love it. So for me, I'm gonna put Dr. Sleep in perfection. All right, next is Elevation, which I don't really remember that much. It is a novel, but it is pretty short, and like very short for a Stephen King novel. And it's about a guy who like moves to a town, and he can't figure out how he's like losing weight, and he can't figure out like, is that it? I think he's losing weight, but he's not like getting any thinner, and it's very strange until he's literally weighing nothing, and there's kind of like a conflict with his neighbors that gets worked out, and then it was just weird. You know what? I think I'm gonna put it under a meh because I just can barely remember it, and it was kind of meh. Next, I have End of Watch, which was the 3rd book in the Mr. Mercedes trilogy, and it's like a really solid ending to that series, and it makes me wistful, I guess. But I'm gonna put this under solid because I did really, really enjoy it, but I didn't like it as much as the other 2 books in the series. However, I think at this point I might enjoy it more than I did then, and that is because when I first read it, the only Stephen King that I had read was 11/22/63, and then the first 2 books in the series, Mr. Mercedes and Finders Keepers. And I don't think neither of those really had any sort of paranormal, like, horror going on. I mean, you could even argue that those aren't even horror. And then 11/22/63 is definitely more sci-fi than horror. So I think that there was a kind of like paranormal element in End of Watch that I didn't like because I was like, well, what? And now that I've read a lot more Stephen King and a lot more books with a paranormal element that I can like go into and be like, oh yeah, this is normal. Like, I think I might like it more. So maybe I'll revisit that. I would love to revisit that whole trilogy because it's just so good. But for now, I'm gonna put it under solid. Next is Fairy Tale. And I really enjoyed this. So I'm going to put this under solid. This was like his second most recent book. This came out last summer 2022, and I really liked it. It was definitely more of a fantasy than anything else, but it was a really good story. Really enjoyed it. Finders Keepers is next, and that is the second book in the Mr. Mercedes trilogy. It is my favorite of the series, and it is fantastic. Have I talked about this trilogy enough yet? Like, I feel like it comes up in like half of all my videos, but I don't know. I just love it. Firestarter. This is definitely one that I think is also underrated. I know people have like seen the movie and heard of the movie, but the book itself is really, really good. So I'm gonna put this in solid. Next is Full Dark No Stars. I can't remember. I know this is a short story collection, but I can't actually remember any of the short stories in it. So I guess I'm gonna put it under decent because I'm pretty sure I rated this well on Goodreads, and I know I enjoyed it at the time, but I just can't really remember much about it, which to me means it probably is not worthy of perfection or solid. Gerald's Game. Also, I'm noticing I really shouldn't have made these little squares. They should be like rectangles, so they're book covers. So I'm so sorry. It's a good thing I already know what all these covers look like because some of them, for example, the next one, you can't even see the title of the book. But the next one is Gerald's Game, which I'm gonna put under meh. I gave this 3 stars when I read it that I saw, but I don't think I want to give it 3 stars even. It's just gross and then like dumb. There's some really, really, really graphic scenes, and like I still think about them sometimes. So, and then I didn't really like where the book went at the end, like the big kind of reveal. It didn't do anything for me. Next is The Green Mile, which is absolute perfection. I absolutely love this book. This is so cool because it came out in a like serial series, I guess. I don't know what that's called. Serial novels. I don't know. They came out like once a month for 6 months, and so obviously this is referring to the collection as a whole, but it's just really neat to like have that done now because I feel like that's something that was very popular like centuries ago, and so that's really neat. But this story is just a beautiful story, and this is one of the only books that's ever made me cry real tears. I am just not a crier, but this one got me good. It is so beautiful and just such a heart-wrenching story. All right, next is Gwendy's Button Box. I don't remember much about this either. It's very short, and there's been like 3 more of them, but like I don't think that this book did anything for me, so I haven't actually read any of the others. So I'm gonna put it in decent because it was decent. Wait, Holly. This is going into perfection because I just read it and it was so good, and it's definitely like there's probably some recency bias going on, but I don't know. I think there's a good chance I would still rate this in perfection, having read it like further in the past. If It Bleeds, this I'm gonna put this in decent, and I think that is one that I really, really enjoyed when it came out. And being that it's a short story collection, which it is, which I didn't actually say, there's certain stories that I like a lot more than others. I know the story in this, Rat, I loved. I think the first story, Mr. Somebody's Phone, I thought was okay. The title story, If It Bleeds, I really liked. So, you know, it's just kind of all over the board. I'm gonna just put it right there in the middle. Now here is another unpopular opinion. I do not like this book at all. I'm gonna put it under meh because I did like finish it, and I like having read it for the cultural references and how much this book is referenced in other books by Stephen King, in particular 11/22/63. And it's funny because the first time I read that, I hadn't read it. Maybe even the second time I read it, I hadn't read it. And so once I did, there's like a whole section of the book that takes place in Derry, Maine, where it is set. And the main character, Jake, in 11/22/63, actually has a conversation with two of the kids from Derry, from it. And they talk about the stuff that happens during the book in it. So that is just like a really cool crossover that I think, I'm glad I read the book, but it's not a favorite, and it's definitely not a favorite. All right, The Langoliers. I'm gonna put this in meh also. This was an interesting concept, and I really enjoyed it at the beginning, but it kind of went downhill for me. It follows a pilot who is deadheading, which is, always cool to read about, like the industry I work in, but that means he is flying as a passenger to be repositioned to work a flight later. So he's deadheading and falls asleep on the flight, and then when he wakes up, everyone's gone, like just gone. And this makes no sense because they're literally in the plane. Like, where would they have gone? So it starts out really cool, and then it kind of just goes off the rails, and it was not for me, and I definitely found it a slog to get through, even though it's like pretty short. So yeah, meh. Later, I'm gonna put this in solid. I did really enjoy this. This is about a kid who can see dead people and communicate with them. And I know it sounds like The Sixth Sense, but like he's always known he's had this ability, and he ends up using it to like solve a crime. And yeah, it's different. It's one of his hard case crime novels. I don't know, but it's really good. I liked it, and I think it is solid. All right, The Long Walk. This is yet another unpopular opinion. This is going in absolutely not. This is maybe the second most boring book I've ever read, second only to Cujo. And in this book, they are just walking. It's like a sort of Hunger Games-y sort of thing where every year when these kids turn 18, I might be getting this wrong, so forgive me if I do, but I think there's like a lottery, and they get selected to do this thing where they have to just like walk until they're the last one left walking. And if you stop, or if you are too slow, because I think you have to walk like 2 miles an hour or something. If you start walking too slow, then you can like get shot or something. If you have to stop to tie your shoe, I can't remember. There's like all these really weird like little rules, but basically it's like walk till you die, and then whoever wins is the winner. The last one standing wins. And it was just so slow. It was boring. I was just over it. And this is so many people's, so for those of you that don't know, Stephen King briefly wrote under a pseudonym, Richard Bachman. And this is frequently people's favorite Richard Bachman book. And I just don't get it. I do not get it at all. I really can't stand this book. Next is Misery. I am going to put this in perfection. This is one of the only books ever that I've read multiple times. It's so, like, you know, these memories from this book, like, you can feel them because they don't leave you, man. This book will, like, get ya because it is just, like, so hard to stomach and you feel such anxiety. Like, there's so much tension. It's just so good. And then the movie's also really good, but, like, the book is even more, like, tense and gross, and just the one scene, everybody knows it, but it's just, it, like, haunts my dreams. Mr. Mercedes, Gotta Be Perfection. That was the first book in the trilogy, and I just love it so much. It was the introduction to Bill Hodges, and it's such a great story, such a great series. Stephen King on writing. This is nonfiction. I'm gonna put this under solid because it's kind of hard to, like, rate nonfiction especially when it's, like, part memoir. Well, I myself am not a writer, so a lot of the stuff about his process was not relevant to me, but, like, very interesting to learn about such a prolific writer and how his process is, and also to learn about his life, particularly surrounding his very famous car accident where he was hit by a car and was nearly killed. So yeah, that was really interesting, so solid. Pet Cemetery. I do like this one. This is so sad though, but I love the vibes. Vibes are good, solid. Another unpopular, I don't know if it's an unpopular opinion. Salem's Lot, for me, is just okay. I don't really have much to say about it. It's about vampires, if you don't know. And I don't know, it was one of the first, I don't know, it was probably in the first, like, 10 Stephen King books I read, and I was kind of sticking to, like, his older books, and I did enjoy it, but it was just, I think I wanted to like it more than I actually did, and I think if I read it again, it might be meh. The Dark Half. This I'm gonna put in decent. I do think I really liked this, but compared to some of the others, like, I'm pretty sure I didn't like it that much. This was kind of after he was exposed for having a pseudonym. He wrote this book about this man who has been writing under a pseudonym, and then his, like, pseudonym becomes, like, his own persona, and, like, he had this picture of a random guy that was supposed to be him, and it just kind of, like, separates from him and starts, like, taking over his life, and it's very cool and creepy, but it's not, like, a super fave or anything. The Girl Who Loved Tom Gordon. This is decent. That is a pretty good book. It was like maybe the third or fourth Stephen King book I read. It is pretty short, and it follows a girl who is with her mom and her brother, and they're, like, hiking in the woods, and she ends up getting lost, and the only thing she has with her is a radio, and every night she turns into the Red Sox game because she wants to hear about Tom Gordon, who is a pitcher for the Red Sox, and that's kind of, like, what gets her through her time lost in the woods. But there's also scary stuff going on because she's a kid and she's lost in the woods, so she, like, thinks she's seeing stuff, and yeah, but it was cute. I mean, again, it's so weird to say cute about horror, but it's a nice story. The Institute. I think I'll put this in solid. I'm finding that a lot of these I know I rated very highly when I did read them, but now I can't recall as many details as I'd like to. The Institute is about a kid who gets kidnapped and taken to this school for kids with, like, special abilities, I think, and then it's actually, like, a bad school. If I'm not, I might have made that up, but I think that's what happens in that book. But I really do like that book. It's a good one. The Outsider. I'm tempted to put this into perfection, but I think I'm gonna stick with solid. It's just not quite there. But I almost feel like any of the books that are in, like, the Holly Gibney canon, I want to give perfection, but I'm not gonna do it. I'm gonna be selective here. The last two, we have The Shining, which I will also put in solid because I loved, but I did that whole situation where I was talking about Dr. Sleep, so you don't need me to rehash that. And The Stand, I'm gonna put it in solid, but I will say it's on the lower end of most of these books, which is, again, an unpopular opinion maybe, because I know a lot of people consider that to be King's like absolute masterpiece, but I don't. I just don't. I just don't. It's very, very long, and it's very dragging at some point. The world building and character building are excellent, and of course the story itself is excellent, but it could have been, and it was originally published as a much shorter book, which, I don't know. It's cool to see like this whole like epic story that came from Stephen King's mind and like how it was originally published as a shorter book, but it might have been able to stay that way. I don't know. I'm contradicting myself, but anyhow, I'm gonna put it as solid. So those are the 34 Stephen King books that I have read so far and how they rank for me. I would love to know what your favorite or least favorite Stephen King books are, and if you share any of the unpopular opinions that I do, or maybe they're not as unpopular as I think. I don't know. But let me know in the comments if you've never read a Stephen King book. I've just given you a really good guide of where to begin if you feel like you have similar reading tastes to me. So thank you so much for watching this video. I am so glad you're here. If you liked this video, give it a thumbs up and hit that subscribe button, and I will see you